This is the Kodak H35 and this is the Ilford Sprite. Today we are comparing these cameras, shooting a bunch of photos, and teaching you how to get the best results. And those results, well, they're pretty good. But there are some quirks. Film is wildly expensive and seemingly only getting more expensive. And what makes these cameras so awesome is how affordable they are. Like, the film price plus processing is almost more expensive than the actual camera body. That's like, you could not buy coffee for a week, save a couple $7 lattes, and be able to afford this camera. Also, thanks to Storyblocks for sponsoring this video. Okay, let's hit it. What makes shooting film fun and unique is that the camera you shoot with matters way less than it does with digital. It's actually the film stock you put in your camera that's important. I just got the H35 a few weeks ago, so I've been shooting on it a decent bit, but I've actually been shooting on the Sprite for over a year now. In fact, in 2022, this is the only film camera that I used. All right, let's quickly go through some specs and facts about these cameras. Most notably, the Kodak Ektar H35, don't know why it's called that, is a half frame camera. Essentially what this means is instead of getting 36 exposures traditionally on a 35mm roll, you get 72. So big win here is that your money for your film essentially goes twice as far. The Sprite, on the other hand, is just a traditional 35mm camera. Now, there is a slight drop in quality when it comes to half frame, but we'll get into all that later in the video. The catch here is that when you go to take a photo on the half frame camera like this, you are gonna be shooting a vertical frame, and that's because it is taking that traditional 35mm film and cutting it in half, giving you a vertical photo. Now, you can always turn the photo this way to then shoot horizontally. This actually gets more confusing than I expected. If you're looking to take some vertical IG bangers, then this is probably awesome, but for me, I actually prefer to shoot in the horizontal landscape, so having to turn my camera vertically to shoot horizontal, it's kind of a lot to process if you're like me and you're just not as smart as other people. Again, on the Sprite, this isn't the case. This is just a traditional shooting experience. Lastly, on both devices, you have a fixed shutter speed, a fixed aperture, and a fixed focus. And by fixed, yes, I mean you cannot change it. This is not a manual camera. It is all locked and loaded. The minimum focus distance is around 1 meter, so kind of like me to the camera, about an arm's length. And then that is basically focusing to infinity. So basically, when you're framing your shot, what you're gonna wanna look for is to make sure that you are in that zone. So things that are super close, it'll be hard for it to catch focus, actually impossible. And then things that are really far away, or at least 3 feet, 1 meter away, you'll be good. All of those nitty-gritty specs you'll see here on the screen, and we'll unpack how to get the best results with each camera at the end of the video. All right, so before we keep going on with this video, it's important that we thank today's sponsor, Storyblocks. Storyblocks is an amazing platform for 4K royalty-free footage, motion graphics, and other creative tools. There are just times when you can't shoot everything for your videos, or shoot day doesn't quite go according to plan, and you have to make up for it in the edit. Also, motion graphics are so hard. Like, I am not a designer, I am not an animator, so there, Storyblocks just always has me covered. The clear-cut licensing just makes life super easy, and they even have a plugin for Adobe Premiere Pro where you can be looking at footage while you're editing. That is just so nice. That's awesome. So check out the link below for their flexible subscription options. Thank you so much for Storyblocks for sponsoring this video. Now let's continue on. All right, just got out of the water. Now we're gonna bike home and take some photos. So let's talk about basically a traditional 35mm film negative versus a traditional half frame negative. Now, the main difference here is quality. If you think 35mm photos look grainy, just wait until you see a half frame photo. You're getting half the resolution, which results in more grain and generally less quality. But that's why a lot of people shoot film. It's because they love the colors and the nostalgic feel. In reality, every camera format is designated a name simply by how much film it's using. So half frame uses the least amount of film, then 35 mil, then 645, 6x7, 6x9, all the way up to large format, which just uses an absurd amount of film. And the more film you use, the more dynamic range you get, the finer the grain becomes. Generally, your image is more sharp and you get more detail in the colors. Sometimes that is important, but most of the times for me, it isn't. All right, quick durability test. I just dropped it. It might be plastic, but it held up all right. Okay, now let's get into what I would consider the most important part of this video, which is actually how to get the best results out of the camera. Seeing as all the settings are fixed, it really comes down to what you're shooting and how you're shooting it. For this video, I shot Cine Still 50D, and the reason is because that means my ISO is 50. If I were to shoot Portrait 400, Portrait 800, or any film that has a higher ISO, then that means my film is more sensitive. Not gonna get too nerdy here, but basically if you are shooting in bright sun like this, then shooting an ISO of basically below 200 is best. If it's overcast, you're gonna wanna shoot around a 400, and if it's cloudy, you're gonna wanna shoot around an 800. And if you're shooting in a darker setting, just keep shooting a higher ISO or push your film. Basically, the darker the scene, the higher the ISO you're gonna wanna shoot. And if you're shooting a half frame camera, that you're gonna have to basically strategize on how much film you're gonna get through. 72 photos is a lot. So if you're shooting, through golden hour, then all of a sudden it gets dark, then you're gonna wanna change film. So there becomes a little bit of like an economy of how you're using each frame and how quickly you're getting through that roll. So over the last week, I just made sure to shoot during times where there was a lot of light and I knew I could get away with shooting a 50 speed film. All right, so out here on the pier with my family, and we've hit that kind of like slightly overcast light. So I'm curious how my 50 speed film is looking. Obviously, I don't know for obvious reasons, but yeah, we'll see. The other thing here is you're not gonna get a ton of depth of field and a ton of bokeh. If you're used to shooting at a 1.4 and seeing tons of fall off, then this is gonna be somewhat of a surprise. The way to remedy this and get the best results is to actually keep things close to frame. So like I said earlier, basically anything a meter and further will most likely be in focus on each of these cameras. So if you put anything closer to camera, so within 3 feet, it's gonna be blurry. So a lot of times what you'll do is something like this, where the, what's closest to the frame has more bokeh. The closer you get, the more bokeh it is. The further away, the less. So if you wanna create depth and bokeh in your images, just get some foreground elements in there and it'll look a lot better. Also, because of the 1/100 and 1/120 shutter speed, it's perfect for handheld shooting with a subject that's isolated or moving somewhat slowly. It becomes more limiting when you're shooting action. So if your subject is whipping through frame, then you're probably gonna introduce some motion blur. I see this actually as an opportunity because you could always pan with your subject, which would make your subject sharp and basically the background blurry, or introduce some cool motion blur with the action. So if it's skating or some sort of sport, I think the motion blur actually can look really cool. Because again, you can't change that shutter speed or the aperture or the ISO because that's kind of locked in. Hope these photos turn out. That'd be nice.
Okay, now, so after looking through all the photos, editing this video, kind of looking at the results, I just want to share my final thoughts and concerns about these cameras. The first being is that the colors looked so different between each camera. I couldn't actually believe how different they looked. I shot the same film stock in the same light, yet the colors were just different. My leading theory here is that it's the built-in lens on each camera, but I can't really know for sure without further testing. So I don't have a final answer for you, but just something I wanted to know is that yes, I too realized that the colors they looked way different. The second thing is that there was more motion blur and camera shake than I anticipated on the H35. The 1/100 shutter speed, you just have to be a little more steady. I was shooting off my bike. There was obviously some motion blur there, but I think even in shots that were stationary, next time I shoot with this camera, we'll make sure I'm a little more steady just so I don't introduce that shake and can get as sharp an image as possible. The third thing is that there wasn't as big of a quality difference as I had originally thought there was going to be. In my mind, it would be as big of a difference between 35 mil in medium format, like shooting a 645 image, but it wasn't. I actually thought they were pretty similar. Yes, there is more quality in the 35mm negative, but it wasn't as noticeable as I had originally thought, and I was actually pleased with the H35 images in terms of how they looked. Obviously, it's going to look better on a computer screen or on your phone or on social media or whatever versus actually printing it. That would probably be a challenge, but I think generally I was happy with the quality out of the H35. All right, well, that wraps up this video. Thank you so much for watching. Appreciate you listening to me ramble. And again, if you want to go check out more of what we're doing with Sunny 16, please do that as well. We got our film photography channel, our filmmaking channel, our channel where we kind of just run around and do whatever we want. That's called Sunny 16. And yeah, just generally appreciate you guys following along all these years and stuff. And yeah, okay, I'm gonna I'm gonna take this card out, put it in my computer, and finish this video because it's not actually done yet. Classic. Okay, thanks y'all.